All right. Okay. Let's get started. Thank you guys for all coming. I know you guys are all busy and have a lot to do, especially if you're handling many things under the business. There's probably your phone's probably going off and different things are happening. So let me just give some quick housekeeping. Thank you guys for coming out to this event. ISSA wants to put on a lot of value-add events across the industry. And we have a great set of speakers today to talk about retention in the janitorial industry. As a bit of housekeeping, you guys are all pre-muted. However, you can all message in on the webinar chat. Just make sure it's being sent to everyone. And our view is that this is more enjoyable if everybody engages, and we try to also answer questions either at the end of the event or throughout the event. So please feel free to use the webinar chat pretty liberally so that we can then engage and fine-tune as we go in this as well. I'll then start off with panelist intros. So I'm going to pass it off to each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Again, this group is amazing, spanning different companies across the United States. They have a tremendous amount of experience. We had a preparation session a few weeks ago, and I was just, that was great. It was they can just speak about so much in terms of wisdom and how much they can do in the industry. So I'm going to pass it on to Dana first to introduce herself briefly, and after that, Michael, and then Billy. But go ahead, Dana.
Awesome. Thanks, Gerald. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We're so excited to have you here today. So quick introduction about myself. I am Dana Boyce, VP of Marketing and Strategy for Pioneer. We are based, our headquarters is in Potomac, Maryland. So we service the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And I am out in the Mile High in Denver, supporting our newer market, which is Denver, Colorado. And Gerald asked for something interesting about each of us individually that many people don't know. So it was about 10 minutes before the call, so we didn't have a ton of preparation time. But I think the thing that I would like to share, and it kind of translates back into my professional life actually, is I was a volleyball player, competitive volleyball player all of my life, played Division I volleyball in college. And I think that's where I get my competitive nature from. So being in business development and then moving up through the ranks and now in marketing and strategy, I have a very competitive nature about me, and that really helps with my day-to-day in the professional world as well. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. And Gerald, I'll pass it back to you.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you, Dana. I'll pass it over to Michael for a brief introduction as well.
Hey, everybody. It's kind of hard to follow Dana, just so you know. I was not a Division I volleyball player. I think I'm actually too short for that. Hi, my name is Michael Fitz. I am our Chief Commercial Officer here at 4M Building Solutions. 4M Building Solutions is a commercial janitorial services provider. We call it Building Service Contractor. A little over 350 million, a little over 5,500 employees, 17 major markets, about 27 different states. Been in the role now for less than a year. Prior to this, I spent 8 years in executive leadership as a general manager, running a little over half of the business operationally. And before that, I was in the Marine Corps for 24 years, retiring as lieutenant colonel. Been everywhere, done everything. In that regards, look forward to kind of answering everybody's questions today. I think we all kind of want this to be informal and hope that you guys will hit us with your questions of interest, and look forward to just talking about retention.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. Yes, we aren't all D1 athletes as well. So let me pass it over to Billy, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Gerald. Hi, I'm Billy Ann Reeder, and I just recently moved into the role of Vice President for Vendor Managed Services and our Technical Solutions for Velocity Services. We're headquartered out of Atlanta, but we service all 50 states plus Canada. And we're part of the Argon Bright group. So we have a sister company called Unify, and we operate out of the UK as well. I spend most of my time listening to what clients need or want and translating that into our technical solutions and making sure they're embedded out in the field. I've spent about 20 years in this industry. I've worked in Europe, Asia, and then for the last 5 years in the US. Definitely wasn't a sports person, but I'm a don't judge a book by its cover type of girl. So I'm heavily into rap music, which most people don't think because I'm a chartered accountant by trade. But it does make you always think. Don't always look at what's on the surface. Just delve underneath it, because actually it's sometimes a surprise what you find.
Fantastic. Thank you, Billy. Thank you. All right. Before moving on, I'll just do a quick introduction. I'm the moderator for the session. My name is Gerald Fong. I'm also the CEO and co-owner of a company called Brightgo. We're a technology company for the industry, spanning operations, accounting, finance, different areas. The idea is to be a modern all-in-one solution for the industry. I'll give a fun fact as well. I'm a nerd because I've studied computer science, and I finished my computer science degree in 2.5 years, but surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, I was also the homecoming prince in high school. So I have this interesting kind of balance of being a nerd, but a little social. So that's kind of my area. My school was pretty nerdy, so it worked out as well. All right, well, we'll move on to the other sections now. So in terms of just the agenda for today, we're gonna have a good chunk of the session, which will be around discussion questions. We're gonna do that for about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, and we're gonna cover a bunch of just good topics like definitions and retention, metrics, root causes, processes, technology, people and culture, and different lessons learned. So we're going to cover about 7 different areas there, and each of the panelists will share different views for each of them. Then after that, we're going to have a Q&A where we'd love to just have questions from the audience kind of going through, and then we'll have closing after that. Feel free to ask questions throughout the session. You don't have to feel like you have to save it all up for the Q&A. We're going to keep track of questions that you guys ask. If the question is immediately relevant and something we should just answer immediately, we'll go ahead and do that, or we'll weave it into the panelist discussion, or we'll save it to the end if it makes sense to kind of save it for the bottom part. But please, it's much more engaging and much more educational for everybody, and also much more interesting for you guys to share questions, because, I mean, my questions, they're okay, but you guys will have even better questions for them. Okay, and so we'll get started. So I'll tee up the first question, which is around definition. And this session is all around what is best-in-class retention. So I figured let's just start by asking the big question, what does best-in-class retention mean to you? Feel free to kind of raise your hand or just jump if you guys want to go. But yeah, I'll probably have 2 out of 3 of you answer. Sometimes it'll be all 3, but up to you guys. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll jump in, I guess. So what is best-in-class retention? I think when we evaluate it, let's just talk broadly about the industry, and anyone can probably chime in also on the chat if they have any thoughts around that. But I think as an industry, there's a couple different things that I would say is like, I think it goes back to some of your strategy. And let me just be clear, because not everyone has the same strategy, all right? So somebody that might be a niche player, maybe who wants to be dominant in, say, in a couple different verticals. Maybe it's whether it's let's say pharmaceutical research or data centers, or kind of like clean room cleaning or some of those things. You're not going to have a ton of customers, so you're going to have, your retention might be, hey, you really want it high. There's others that are in tier 1 markets, and you may define, relative to your competitors, in the mid 80s. Personally, I think you got to define what constitutes for success for you. For us in our business, and kind of broadly, it's 95% or better. And I think most people would agree that that's just a really good spot. I think what's important, though, is you have to define it as a team. Because if you don't have it clearly defined around the clear expectations of the enterprise, and what constitutes success under customer retention, you're never going to hit it. So it's really about defining it for your business, for your culture, and for your strategy. But I think generally best in class is 95% plus.
And that's an annual, just so I'm very clear, that's an annual revenue retention or client retention?
Yeah, and so that's actually, Joel, that's a great way. There are actually, depending on the scale, there are 2 ways to factor that. You can either factor that by revenue, or you may factor that by logo. In some situations, if I have, say, I do business with Gerald Fong's business, Dana and Billy, each one of you represent a logo. but you also have revenue associated with that. So I might, so you could probably look at it both ways. And that's probably a great way to do it. Because a lot of times we focus just on revenue, or we maybe just focus on customers. I think you really got to understand both sides of that.
And sorry, just when you throw the number 95 out, then it also has the question of like, is that a metric that you're tracking that's excluding growth and upsell of that existing portfolio, right? So that number can never be above 100. It's either 100 or below. I just want to understand that when you throw the number 95 out.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. Because you're really getting into it, and you're showing me that you're kind of nerdy. So that's really good, Gerald. Hey, I'm trying to bring some levity. That was not a shot at Gerald. I was trying to be funny. So, yeah, it's a really great question, because I think there's a lot of different ways to define it. So let's talk about, if I start the beginning of my fiscal year, and we use calendar year. So on 1 January, I have 15 logos or customers, and I have $15 million. Okay. I'm going to track from the beginning of the year to the end of the year how many logos I still have and how much of that revenue I still have. And I want it to be better than 95%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Then what I would also say is there's other things out there. We won't dive into it too much, but you can get into what they call net retention. What net retention is how much of those logos and revenue I keep, and how much I upsell them through the year. Right. So that might be, hey, a net retention number, or it could be how much. You can also measure it in how much new logo business comes in versus how much logo business I lost. So there's several different ways to do it. I would just count on defining it as a company and what really matters. But I think for the purposes of today, it's what do I start with January 1 and what do I end with on December 31?
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's it. Same with us. And Michael, I'm going to break the rules right from the get-go here and ask a panelist a question from the panelists. So when you talk about logo versus just your entire portfolio, what do you guys do in terms of, if you have a logo that has a portfolio attached to that, does that impact the bottom line retention percentage, or are you looking at it as just, across the board, that's your baseline number at January 1st, and then no matter if it's a portfolio or just a single opportunity, you're looking at that the same at the end?
So the question might be, like, I'll pick a large 500 Fortune 500 company, let's say in manufacturing space, let's say John Deere. Okay. So I do business with John Deere. And as I do business with John Deere, that's a logo. But then I might do 10 sites or 10 facilities or a portfolio of facilities under John Deere. So in this situation, let's say I lose a facility under John Deere, which, for whatever reason, I lose a facility. Probably, Dana, the way we're going to capture that is I don't have a logo loss, but I have a revenue loss. And so I would track it probably in that fashion, and I'm tracking both. I think also, let me just say this. I don't want to overcomplicate it, because most people on this call are in different categories of maybe $1 million to $10 million to $100 million of business. And so I really want to try and break it down for people to have practical examples. The best way is just don't overthink this too much. If I have $1 today, I want to keep 95 cents of that dollar for this year. And I actually want to try and keep 100% of that and grow it to 110 or 115. That or $1.10 or $1.15. That's really what I think the fundamentals of what we're talking about. And the more sophisticated you can get, and if you need to have those broken out in different ways. Dana, to your point, we've even had conversations as an internal executive team at the C-suite level of some of those definitions. And I will say that as we've grown from 50 million to 100 million to 200 million, and depending on our financial backing, whether we're PE backed or we're still privately held or whatever, those things might change, right? And so I will say that change. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to, if we're going to if you're imagining build your business, and you're trying to build a house, you're not taking bricks from the bottom of the foundation and putting them on top and expecting to get very far. You have to keep the vast sum, 95% better, of your customer base, and then stack on new business on top of it. That's the only way to grow a successful business. But great question. Thank you for breaking the rules, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. I think one of the other key items to think about when you're looking at is the why behind it, right? So we're tracking that percentage number, but we also really want to understand and dig deeper into that percentage changed, whether it be up or down, and what was the why behind that change. And I saw recently a post on LinkedIn with a fellow business developer that I know from back in the day, and she said that, the kind of the typical response that you get from a client when you ask the why is, well, it was because we got a cheaper price. And I think looking at that reason and really asking yourself, is it about price or is it about something else? And you may know right away that it's probably not about price and it's about they had a better relationship with another contractor or they got a better offering from someone else. But you have to really find out why, because that why will help you in the future to continue to build that retention number over time. And that's something that we dig into a lot here is understanding why. If you don't know the why, go and ask and have that conversation. And hopefully you have a good enough relationship, which I think we're going to touch on a lot through this conversation, is like that relationship is going to allow you to really get a truly honest answer as to why did we lose this building or what could we do better in the future if we ever get an opportunity to work with you again.
Perfect. I figured this would be a great time. We have some pre-prepared polls that we'd love to ask the group out here now that we're talking about these different metrics and numbers. One of them was, what is everybody's retention metric? Revenue retention. So please submit an answer. There's between below 85 all the way to 98 plus. So go ahead and please share your different responses there. All right, while that's kind of going through, I think what Dana said was really, really interesting. I think it's on the one hand, when people sell, I always hear people say we aren't the cheapest bid, but when people lose their clients, they'll say somebody came in cheaper. And so how do I put those two next to each other? If you guys are, if generally a BSC is not trying to be the lowest bidder, but then they use that as the reason why they then lose the client. So I think that's a very interesting topic. Of course, this will be something that we'll talk about at length a little further down. But just one of the conundrums I've noticed in the industry is speaking to a lot of owners. All right, let's see. So we have 23 answers here. It seems like everybody's doing great here. Okay. Any other ones? Last ones to send. I know there's 40 attendees. We have about 23 answers. So any last stragglers here? Otherwise, I think we can close out the poll. All right, we got one more there. Okay, let's close it. Oh, still getting some more. All right, I'll give it 10 seconds and then we'll close it off. Okay, great. Let's close off the poll. Martha, let me know if you can show it to everybody. Great, this is now shared. Okay, seems like everybody here is doing an amazing job. 95% plus. That seems like it's 80% of the group is doing above 95, 60% between 95 to 98, and then 20% between 98 to 100. So maybe it's a self-selection. You guys chose to show up here. That means you care about it. So everybody here is amazing at it. But this is fantastic. Let's keep going then. And so the next session we'd love to talk about as a group is root causes. I think we were kind of segueing into that, which was, are we losing buildings because of price, because of service, because of relationship? I saw one of the questions were also about whether you count losses that are not due to service as also part of this or not. So would you guys like to share, what are your thoughts around the most common reasons for losing a building and how to spot those early?
Billy, you want to jump in?
Absolutely. I think we can't underestimate how much customer relationship actually ties into retaining your clients. And if you don't have an open, transparent relationship, you really don't know what's going on at site or how they're feeling about the services you're provided. So we do like an annual net promoter score to actually go out and ask the opinions of our top 20% of clients. And that relationship with their national account manager or their on-site project manager is normally one of the highest scores that we get back from them. And relationship and communication, I think, is really the keystone of making sure that you can retain your clients. We hear a lot about sometimes you can't do anything about price. And a success measure for us is if you lose an account, please don't lose it for service. So if you have that great relationship and you're doing great service, they would be the key metrics that we look at for making sure that we retain a client. And normally, if we've lost a client, it's because we don't have those in the field or at the right level within our C-suite.
Perfect. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how do you tend to group the responses in terms of if a churn were to happen? Do you have any thoughts around the major buckets that you guys were to put it in?
Service would be one, relationship would be another. Price always comes into it. And then if there's any sort of like health and safety failure or something that's more statutory or mandatory, they usually come in those 4 buckets.
Yeah, I think for us, one of the keystones that we kind of take into consideration when we're looking at just retention overall is the fact that retention is truly a long-term investment. So it's not that you can come in when you know you're having challenges, whether it be service or whether it be price, and be the superhuman that saves the scenario, right? You've got to be having those consistent conversations. And I think as you get to know your client through, whether it be through, business reviews or some sort of structured meeting rhythm, or whether it be just through taking them to lunch and having sort of a casual conversation, it's being able to understand your client and their needs, what situation that they're in. Are they in a financially challenging situation where you could potentially come in and suggest a more creative solution, which could ultimately save them a little bit of money in the long run? Being able to have that information in your back pocket as you navigate that relationship is really, really important, because you don't want to ever be surprised and have your client come to you and say, hey, we're in financial distress, we're going to have to go with the lowest bidder, and that's unfortunately not you. Or, what, we've been having some service challenges, and because we don't frequently interact or communicate, we would have given you a heads up, but we haven't heard from you in a while. So you never want to be caught off guard. So the more you can have those interactions on a regular basis with your clients, the better equipped you are to deal with those scenarios as you kind of go through the relationship.
And I think Willem here asked the question I think is pretty relevant, is that how do you see retention differ between things like contract size, customer end market, these different areas, and how do you then treat it differently if it's a different group in terms of retention, or you think of it differently?
Yeah, our entire strategy is around in markets that are going to be favorable to our business strategy. So at Forum Building Solutions, we are not a low-cost provider. And listen, there's nothing wrong if you're a low-cost provider and you're in major tier 1 markets and you're working around prevailing wage dominated by union. Listen, you're fighting for peanuts to get in the buildings and then upsell your clients around tag work, because that's where the money is. In some situations, you may even take a lead loss in a tier 1 market just to get to the auxiliary services that are available through change orders and other things. We don't play in that market. I play in you'll see a lot of BSCs that choose to focus in tier 2, tier 3 markets. They focus on industry segments that are less commoditized or less price sensitive and more value based. And we sell off of value. And now, I'm not trying to be a professor of strategy, but you have to have a clear strategy because it directly affects your customer retention, your growth, and your profitability. So I think it all kind of starts with defining who you are and what you want to do, because I think we danced around it. Gerald, you asked the question, what's the difference? And the gentleman's implying I think Billy was spot on, and so was Dana. Like, here's two things. One, it is all about relationship. As a trusted advisor, it is always about price, but let's couple those two things together. How many of us right now are willing to go out and buy exclusively? Like, if we had the money, right? And sometimes we don't have the money, but how many of us would go buy that really fancy purse or that car or that thing that we just feel the value of it, right? But listen, people are willing to pay for what they believe in. And particularly facility managers or property managers are willing to fight for their service provider, that vendor, if they feel that they're of value. And value sometimes means that the phone isn't ringing. But you can't be obtuse or ignore price. So you're always having to go in and making sure that on the front end, I saw a question, how do you do it? If you don't have quarterly business reviews with your top customers, right, where the money is, you need to be doing that. Somebody asked, how can you do that without being salesy or pushy? It's a value add. Communication is a value add. Constantly be communicating. And then there are certain segments within contracts, to the gentleman's question. Listen, top 20 customers in most companies are where 80% of your revenue and profit come from. You must be in front of those customers with executive level reviews, senior management reviews, and using data analytics and evidence-based reporting of the value that you're generating for them. In a 3-year contract at 18 months, you should be already talking about renewal. At 1 year prior to start talking about give and gets, and start getting in front of how you can negotiate around value propositions to potentially either find margin that you need or give back margin, because you don't want it to go to the street. You know, in a 1-year contract, you should be talking about it every 3 months before the end of the contract. Like, have an engagement strategy that talks about it. And the one thing I would say is use evidence-based reporting of how you're bringing the value to the relationship. Don't let it be a feel good. Let them see the evidence. And oh, by the way, don't forget the buying committee. Your usual point of contact at a facility is not the entire buying committee. So give them the evidence that they can go to the buying committee and say, hey, look how great Dana and Billy are, and Gerald. Like, give them the evidence so that they can take it to the buying committee. But bottom line is you have to have a process and a policy around customer retention that is well thought out, but mostly it needs to be executed. It has to be as important as anything else you do. You have to execute a strategy, both the strategy and the tactical execution of a retention plan. And if you don't have one, there's plenty of people out there you can get one from, and there's best practices. Just go to ChatGTP and ask for one. But bottom line is have a plan and execute it. Hope that helps.
That's great. That's great. I think that's a perfect. I mean, and you knocked out all the questions as well, Michael. You found them all. You knocked them all out one by one. So look at you.
Sorry.
No, that's amazing. I think you did a great job of kind of tying that all together. And I think that's also a great segue into processes. That's kind of where this was going next. And you teed it up perfectly and also laid out a great way to approach that. Dana, Billy, would you guys like to fill in on anything around, I guess, getting a little more tactical? What are your processes, rhythms for how you drive retention with your clients?
Billy, go ahead. You can take that one.
Perfect. So we do something similar to what Michael was speaking about. So we have a cadence of when we're going to be talking to our clients about retention and renewal, just to make sure that we're hitting the key points during that contract period, and we know if there's anything that needs to be looked at. We also run, we call it the Client in Jeopardy program. It's very specific to if we've got a client which we think has become a hotspot and actually needs additional attention. Everyone from our president down actually focuses in on that contract to make sure if there was any areas that needed to be looked at, we can get those fixed before we get to the point of actually doing a contract renewal or any conversation about it. Michael's correct. You have to be very deliberate in the way that you do things. But retention also starts the day of go live. We also have a structure in place so that when we have new management teams come in or somebody transfers from one account to another, we have a set program they go through. So so they know what great looks like. We don't just want them to be good. We want them to be great at what they do. And it's a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and then it's re-reviewed at 6 months and 12 months. So we're just very deliberate in making sure that we know what we need to do. We focus in on making sure that we've done it, and if we haven't, we have a team that specializes in coming in to fix it, so that when we get to that renewal process, we've already had all of those discussions. You should be in a good place to actually be delivering what we said in the contract.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so we have a playbook format, which our client engagement managers sort of manage over the course of the relationship. Because one thing that you have to consider and remember is as you navigate through a relationship with a client, things may change, right? So this isn't a set it and forget it type of environment where you can just say, hey, here's our playbook, here's our programming, and we're going to put it in place and it's going to work for you. We guarantee it. No, this is a collaborative environment where you have to continuously ask, is this programming in the playbook and how we have it spec'd out, is it working for you? How are the nightly reports working for you? Do you need those reports nightly, or could we, revise that frequency to maybe weekly? Because you get a lot of emails and you don't want a nightly report every night. You don't need it. So it's asking those questions again, whether it be in a business review that's monthly or quarterly or a lunch or any type of engagement with that client, asking the right questions to understand, is the programming, is the playbook that you have in place working for them? Because every single time that you go into a client, it's crafting that program for that particular facility, whether it be an office building or whether it be a school. Those are two very different environments. And so that programming and playbook does not look the same. So that's something to keep in mind, is that you always have to be kind of moving along and making slight tweaks to that programming in order to continue to have a successful collaborative environment with your clients.
And Dana, just to add to that, we have to think as well now, because clients are having their budget squeezed. We recently had a client who came and asked us for a 30% decrease in our cost because she was being squeezed somewhere else within her business. Because we have a great relationship, we couldn't do 30%, but we got her about 22%. But we went through every step, and we do have a playbook of what we put in, and then we have a playbook of how we can offer less but try to provide the same service level. So you just have to be able to pivot, because those conversations are going to keep coming over the next 12 to 24 months.
Exactly. And that's what you want, is them to come to you first before they actually go and seek another provider, right? So they come to us and we will try our best to get you to the point where you need to be. We have an open conversation and sort of dialogue around that. And at the end of the day, most of the time you can make it work just based on, your knowledge of that facility and your staffing models and how that facility is operating from an occupancy perspective. And so you, as the current provider, have sort of an insider perspective into how can we make this work for you.
I want to just, Billy, and Dana, I think you guys both agree with this. And for the group, I saw a lot of folks that were in operations and other things. We're talking a lot about relationship, but you still have to deliver on quality. So I love what you said, Dana, never ever settle on that the customer is satisfied today, because today you're a peacock, tomorrow you're a feather duster. Like the quality of and delivery of service can never be overlooked.
Never.
So just make sure, and by the way, when Billy talked about this happens, you're going to have people come back and say, hey, I need 10%, 5%, whatever. Let me ask you this, and this is rhetorical. How many of you are looking outside of your box to look across at how other people are doing things to advance productivity? How to leverage technology that's emerging, whether that's battery operated technologies, robotics, or I was at a seminar last week where somebody started talking about AI agents that are coming out now because of the rapid stuff. What if you built an AI agent that took all this data and took all of your processes and policies and procedures around customer retention and just started doing predictive analytics with what you have at your level through an AI agent, or taking your production rates and looking at your production rates and figuring out how you can just get 500 more square feet per hour, which could honestly give you at 5,000 square feet a 10% cost advantage, right? That you might need to be able to take some of that, put it back in a customer's pocket, put a little in your pocket, and put some of your team member wages, right? Just to be competitive in the marketplace. Because a lot of times what I'm going to say, and here's the reality, quality is tied to team member retention, and those two are tied to customer retention. So that's a formula that I'm always looking at, right? How are we executing? Or the quality, in order to have quality, I have to have good team members, world-class team members. When I have those two together, I typically win at the customer retention level, and I'm always focused on those buckets.
1,000%, Michael. That's spot on. And actually, it's one of the notes that I just wrote down before the call was one of the things that, because I am the one who a lot of the time is in front of clients for these business reviews. And the one thing that I never ever forget to do is educate myself on how are we doing from a service perspective? How are we doing from a billing perspective? How are we doing from a staffing perspective? Is there, have we had a lot of turnover at that site? Because all of those things at the end of the day will impact your retention and will ultimately impact your relationship with that client. And if I go to a client meeting and we're talking once a quarter and I'm not prepared with that information, it's setting myself up to fail, and it's ultimately setting the company up to fail, because I need to have that knowledge and have the why behind why are we struggling on the invoicing side? Are there questions that maybe the finance team relayed back to the client, but we haven't got an answer? I can answer that in that meeting. So having all of that information and equipping yourself with sort of the overall picture of the client health is really, really important when you get that opportunity to sit in front of the client and talk about the business as a whole. If you go in and you're not prepared and you don't know that information, it's not going to be a valuable meeting. And we all know how busy everyone is and how difficult it potentially is to get that meeting. So you really want to capitalize on that time.
Well said, Dana. Gerald, are we close to questions? I mean, we got 20 minutes left.
Well, you actually teed us up perfectly to the next two sections of our brief topics, which is one, which is technology, which I think you're already sharing about, and then the other one is on the team and how we kind of culture. So let's talk briefly about that. So I'll kind of do a little round of the horn on technology and people. I think Michael already shared some great things there. And then I think in the last 15 minutes, we'll open up to questions. But Dana, Billy, feel free to jump in. And of course, Michael, feel free to elaborate more on either of those areas.
Well, so all right, real quick, I just kind of touch on technology and where it can help you. Obviously, technology can help you deliver higher quality. It can also give you higher data points that Dana talked about, no pun intended, data and Dana. But, I do believe in evidence-based reporting. I've said that a couple of times. I think it's important, like Dana said, come with facts, come with being prepared of what have been sources of challenge. Don't forget also to talk about the good stuff. A lot of times we come in and we're talking, it should be a holistic, transparent conversation. I think Billy said that, and talk about the good and the bad. And there's no reason to hide anything. It needs to be on the table, because that's how you foment trust. When you foment trust, you can be an advisor and then you can deliver value. That unlocks it. But then you have to execute. So where technology can really help you, in my opinion, is around execution. There is so much that's emerging out there that can really help you and technology-wise. Even here on this group, I think both of the ladies probably have some ideas of how you can improve your quality assurance and evidence-based reporting. I know Dana's got some stuff that she uses. I'm sure Billy's got some. We have some. Do you have a quality assurance program, right? And if not, there are plenty of things. You can go buy a QR code and stick somewhere. Be thinking outside of the box and be looking at it. And by the way, I think everyone is always worried about cost, right? build in an ROI factor on it. Don't make it just a cost. Make it a cost center that can deliver a return on investment, and hold yourself to it. Use it as a KPI. And if I'm making an investment here, this is what I want to see, and treat it like a project. Hey, I'm going to make this initial investment. This is what I'm expecting. Test it. And what I'm going to say is always be testing, proofing, and scaling your business with technology.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I mean, technology for us is a big differentiator. We do have our own technology platform, which helps us internally be able to really navigate our business. But the one thing I kind of toggle back and forth between the queen of technology for Pioneer, and then really getting information and feedback from clients, right? So technology can be a huge differentiator and a huge value add. It can also be the detriment of that relationship. Time and time again, I have conversations with clients about technology, and they, I'd say 9 out of 10 will say, oh yeah, we had a great experience with your technology in the sales process, and now we never see anything. The technology is not being used. We don't have visibility into the technology. So if you're going to invest in technology and you're going to use that as a differentiator, make sure that you are in turn utilizing that technology on the back end. That doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be showcasing a big fancy technology platform with all the bells and whistles, but you can be influenced by the data behind the scenes and talk to your clients about that data. What are you seeing from your inspection reports? What are you seeing from your nightly reports? How are you using that to correlate back to training within your organization, and looking at trends and how those trends are emerging across their properties? So there's a lot of ways that you can use technology behind the scenes to really increase that transparency and visibility. I think the way that we approach it with our clients is we're a data influenced versus data driven. And that word influence is a softer approach, because a lot of clients are still very sort of standoffish about technology. They don't want to be overwhelmed. Cleaning is one of many services across their facility. And so how can you influence them with your technology, but not overwhelm them with it?
Perfect.
And I'd also say, so we have proprietary software which we do all our quality assurance things in, but we also have an app that's actually designed purely for our frontline teams. And part of client retention is actually about making sure you've got frontline teams at site that stay, and they keep the intrinsic knowledge and build that relationship. So we've actually put part of our tech development into offering benefits and perks that we hope would differentiate us from our competitors. But we use an app to do it. So we can also then communicate directly with the frontline. So our president can actually contact every frontline member today with any message. We can do it by team, we can do it by region. And we were trying to not only have the tech in place so that you've got the client interface, but it really drives our retention to be able to speak directly with our frontline teams. And so we've put a lot of development into making sure tech touches their lives as well as our clients.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I think just to summarize at a high level, I think technology, data influence as opposed to data driven, I think is a very interesting theme. And technology is not a, panacea to just solve your problems. You also have to think about how it weaves in, and how do you think about how you use it as a differentiator when selling, but then you have to be careful not to sell it and then not actually use it on the other end, because that can also be another area. And I think what Michael called out was really, really fitting as well, which is, should you be thinking of it as a, lowest bidder, like I want the cheapest technology, versus thinking about it from an ROI and holding that provider or vendor accountable to the ROI as well, and using that as a project as opposed to just a cost center. So I think those are all very different and unique ways to think about technology that I think stands out. All right, I'd like to move over to Q&A at this point. I think there's a few questions here that I'd also like to ask the group here, but feel free to put more questions here. I think we only have a couple right now that we can go through. So as we're answering questions, feel free to submit more questions here and we'll go through them one by one. I'll call out one question by Jeff Southard. I'm interested in how the panel sees the separation between sales and operations. Should salespeople stay involved after the sale, and to what degree, or should they just move on to find the next deal? And this is as it relates to client retention.
Well, since I guess I lead as a chief commercial officer responsible for sales and marketing, what I would say is that forums policies have been in a long time that operations maintains their long-term relationship with the client or the customer or our partners. Sales typically is a, you win and you move on kind of situation. I would say there are pros to that. There are also cons to that. And I would always listen, as a Marine here, and somebody said "oorah" earlier, so "oorah" back to you, Sean. So, hey, one of the things I'd always say is, we often like to say black and white. We like to say, particularly as you come to these things, we want to hear the black and white answer of what to do, the secret sauce. Professionals operate in the gray. I would never encourage a sales rep that builds a relationship through sales didn't suddenly drop the relationship, because what's the number one way to get new business is referrals and same customer sales. So be very careful just to tell your sales rep to go away. What winds up happening is your ops and sales develop partnerships together to go out and grow the business. And, a sales rep should be coming back from time to time and sitting in a quality business review, right? How's the relationship going? Is there a future opportunity? How is ops doing? Too far we can silo, and I fight every day to keep sales and ops from being siloed. So yes, I would say ops takes the lead on the relationship day to day, but but sales should not be excluded from the relationship and maintaining the relationships and offering help to operations. And by the way, somebody asked another question. How do you divide inside and outside sales? Let me just say, I have a marketing team, inside sales, and an outside sales team, but customer retention is everybody's concern.
And maybe just a quick follow-up to that one. I think Jeff's question is very relevant here. Who's responsible for rebids? Is it the sales or operations team? So it's contract renewals. Yeah.
In our company, operations.
Okay.
Yeah, and Gerald, we're structured slightly different, although we don't hesitate to sort of pivot in some cases, right? So we actually have what's called a client engagement team, which is sort of an intermediary between operations and the true business development or salespeople. But those client engagement managers also have a KPI for sales. It's just not as high as a true business developer that's their sole responsibility. And that client engagement layer is really the relationship layer. So it allows for us to have our operations teams on site, really focusing on operating and making sure that everything is running smoothly on that side, and not necessarily fielding the day-to-day, questions, issues from clients. You missed a trash can. So it is an additional layer, and we feel like that really works for us and for our business. And it also allows for sort of that long-standing relationship with the client. So whether your salesperson is a client engagement manager or a business development manager, that person always stays involved and is always keeping themselves in front of the client. One thing to remember is that client who works for JLL today is going to work for CBRE tomorrow, and you want them to call you when they move from that great relationship that you had at a property to their new property and their new company. And so we always keep that in the back of our minds. These property managers and facility managers do make changes, and so that relationship and sort of keeping them top of mind is really important.
Great. And maybe one other question here that Willem asked here is, do customers expect a client portal for whatever tech you use, regardless of whether they actually use it or not? Is it important to them during the sales process?
I mean, I'll take a stab at that one. I think the client portal or some way for them to have visibility inside your tech platform is important. I think it depends on the individual. So there's this concept of we can still push everything to you if you want it, but the feedback that we get a lot of times is, okay, listen, I get 250 emails a day. The likelihood of me really spending a lot of time on that email where you sent me a nightly report is slim to none. However, if I need that nightly report, I would like to have the capability to access it. So we have, a client portal which allows for them to access our platform and then have visibility into those nightly reports, inspection reports, tasks, so that they can see it at their leisure versus us pushing all of that information to them, which could, again, be this concept of we don't want to overwhelm you. We want to have that data and have you be able to pull it when you want. And that seems to work for a lot of clients. However, I think the communication aspect and really understanding your client is important because some are old school and they're like, yes, I want an email in my inbox every morning so that I can show up to my office, sit down at my computer and look at my nightly report and make sure that everything was done or if there were any issues identified the night before.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I'll be honest, I've had very few people ask me if I have a client portal. But to Dana's point, I work very hard to understand what my customers' preferred communication strategy is and make sure they are 100% satisfied with getting everything they would need from me. And I'll be honest, I think you guys got to understand that's also generational.
Yeah.
Like I guarantee you the young property manager today who's coming right out of college wants that information a lot differently than somebody that's been around for a while, and sitting as the VP in the procurement department, right? Like everybody's different. So I think what Dana said is spot on. Just move to their needs. If you always remember, just move to their needs and be able to provide that information in a manner that makes sense. Most of the time I have found that just a simple PowerPoint and some snippets out of your quality assurance program works. And that's typically good enough. If you're thinking like, how do I do that level of reporting? It's 3 or 4 slides in a simple PowerPoint that you can snip out of your quality assurance program and do that once a quarter and have talking points. One thing I would say is that I don't want to skip this. If you're not asking MPS, like Billy suggested early, you need to be. And I think Billy, you said you're trying to get it annualized.
Yes. Well, yes. Just so we
Yeah.
don't overwhelm the clients, because you also don't want to be asking them too often.
Yeah, there's always that rub. So
yeah. And when we present to clients, we always do the PowerPoint, but I always offer them a demo. It sort of tells you up front how engaged they're going to be in the program. We always tell them exactly like Dana does. You can use it, not use it. I'll send it to you. You can log in. But normally if they ask for a demo, they're going to be using it themselves. So we always offer that opportunity for them.
good point. Good way.
Perfect. Let's see. I think we could probably answer one more question. Oh, this one's just a quick one. Dana, is what you described a proprietary system or readily available to others? That was just a question that Patrick asked.
Yeah, Patrick, it actually is available to others. So reach out if you want more information for sure.
Perfect. And any other questions here? We can probably take one more question before we wrap up. Let's see, anything else? Somebody has some takeaways that they posted here. Thank you.
There's one, summary. Gerald, from Rebecca. It's what strategies would you recommend for developing relationships and staying in front of potential clients without coming across as pushy or salesy? I love this question because it is, you have to kind of walk a fine line. One of the things that I sort of try to use in this regard is try to, once you meet someone, find a common ground. And that common ground could be a number of different things, whether it be, that they really like a particular industry association and they go to every single event. You could put that on your list of things to do if you want to connect with that person. Maybe make sure that you're going to those industry events so that you can see them there. Another thing that we use is just finding potentially something that you can identify with them. So for example, I really love football and they really love football. They're a huge Denver Broncos fan. I'm going to make sure that I note that, and I'm going to try to take them to a Denver Broncos game. Another way that we kind of use as more of a soft relationship starter is philanthropy and community engagement. So we're very big in philanthropic efforts, and you wouldn't believe the connection that so many clients have to community and to philanthropy. And we do a lot of philanthropy events throughout the year. And so connecting them into that world is also a really nice way to start to develop that relationship, but not be salesy. I think the one thing that I always remember is at the beginning of a relationship, I'm truly not even thinking about the sale. I'm thinking about how can I get to know this person? How can I allow them to get to know me and start building that relationship and trust behind the scenes, and the sale will come later. And some of your sales, believe it or not, could take years and years and years, 5, 10 years down the line. That person will call you back and say, hey, I'm ready to give you an opportunity. And Michael and Billy can probably second me on that. You can't necessarily meet someone and expect a sale to come from that interaction right away.
Yeah, well said, Dana. I mean, my closing thought is this, guys, is as you determine your strategy and what you want to do around customer retention, I think that a company of character is represented by individuals of character, and people of good character are seen as good partners. And I just want to go back to what Billy and Dana have said over and over as you've listened to them today. It's about relationships, and then people want help. Please keep in mind, our facility and property managers want your help. It is one of the biggest decisions that they make every 3 years around contracts. They don't want their phone ringing. They have a responsibility to make sure that the trash cans are like, they're looking for a partner to help them. And so as an outsourced partner, they just want somebody to care. And that's going to show up and do the best they can. You don't have to be perfect, but it's about being authentic and being a person of character that represents a company of character, and it goes a long ways. And you will win most relationships and most customer retention goals just by showing up and having a genuine concern to be a good partner.
Perfect. Well, it is the top of the hour. I think this has been a great webinar. I think Nick gave us a shout out. Thank you to the panelists and everyone. Best webinar I've attended in 18 months. Wow, that's thank you, Nick.
Thank you,
I
guys.
appreciate everybody coming. Thank you, Dana, Michael, and Billy. I think there's been a ton of engagement and a lot of great questions. So this is just as much the audience helping to lead this webinar as well. So thank you guys, everybody, for coming. I believe there will be a recording being sent out as well. So feel free to pass this on to your team or anybody else that you think would benefit from this. And thank you guys all for sharing this hour together. I think we'll
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.
great
Thank
day.
you. Good
Thank you.
luck. Bye, guys.